Hello out there, and after 10 months on the road being tested by a number of other people in the knife community, the Spyderco Native 5 in Maxamet steel is back home, and today's video is going to be a fun one because I'm going to be following up on all the experiences that the people who tested this knife for me had, and I'll also just be wrapping up the whole thing with what I saw when I got the knife back and the sharpening that I had to do, and what degree of success I had in sharpening the knife, and we'll just go through some of the wear that you see on the blade as well. All the details in the Maxamet that you might be interested in. All right, and yeah, it should be a pretty fun video, an action-packed one, in that I am doing a cut test in here as well, and I will bring in the Spyderco Lil Native for a size comparison. So just a lot to talk about, and mostly that's because I'm just really excited to have the Native 5 back in my possession. The Native is one of my favorite Spyderco designs of all time, probably one of the most EDC-friendly knives that I've ever had, and so that's really why when the Maxamet version came out back in April of 2017, I jumped on picking it up so quickly. You know, just the idea of having a unique and new steel in a time-tested design, you know, was too much to pass up. And it was that whole thought process that gave me the inclination to take this knife and just send it around the country to a number of people who I really respect in terms of their opinions and, you know, their ability and knowledge to use knives and really know what they're talking about. And that's why this knife went around to some of the people that I really like Warpath 101 and Machete J, Minnesota Knife Guy, and then finally Doc P91B. And the point of this was not really for them to make videos or post stuff or do reviews. It was just for people who I like and respect to get the opportunity to use what was then and actually still is a very unique steel in the marketplace. And so I did get a lot of really good feedback. Now, Doc P, he did do a pretty in-depth review of the knife, and so I'll link to that down below as well. So you can get his feedback directly from him. But just over the course of the video, I'll share what some of the other guys told me and some of the things that they thought about the knife as I go through some of the interesting details. And so let's start with some of that. Let's start with just the corrosion and the start of what you can see to be eventually patina. You know, I wouldn't quite call some of these stains patina yet because, you know, there's really no color or anything. It's just sort of staining. But I guess over time, you know, as the blade continues to fill with these spots, it will patina and hopefully start to look more attractive. But honestly, you know, these stains aren't really that big of a deal. And, you know, this is sort of a good measurement of what this knife will look like after use. You know, after 10 months of just regular use, maybe even irregular use, you know, it's not going to look perfect anymore. There's no way around that. You know, you can oil it as much as you want, but if you use this knife regularly, this stuff will probably happen. You can see a pretty good spot there, a couple other small spots on this side, but then over here, just a lot of it, just a lot of visual wear. You know, Maxamet not really at all a stainless steel, so you are going to have some issues in trying to keep this staining from happening. And I didn't know how drastic that was until just yesterday, because just yesterday, this knife got stained even more. And those two spots are actually, you can see where the glare is hitting them right now. Right above the number 90 and then right above the spider, there's a couple lines. And my father used this knife just yesterday. He was using it outdoors, just carving up a tree branch. And, you know, it got sticky. I guess it was sap or something. And I didn't clean the knife at the end of the day. Just forgot to. And so when I opened the knife up to film this video, it was dirty. And it was dirty and I had to clean it. And when I cleaned it, lo and behold, these two spots are there permanently now. They're stains after less than 24 hours. So that's crazy. I mean, it's crazy how quick that's going to happen. And, you know, there's a whole lot in terms of chemicals and whatever you get onto the knife that might cause it to be faster. So who knows if it was something like in that like tree sap or whatever it was that made it stain so quickly. But yeah, if you're going to use this knife and you're going to use this steel, be ready for it to happen. You know, or just really, really maintain it and be all over taking care of it and oiling it and cleaning it very, very quickly after use. But for me, that's really not what I'm going for. You know, this knife is going to just keep being a user, so I'm not too worried about any of this stuff. But it was definitely worth noting, you know, just how quickly that happened. And one other thing to note about the stains, and I might have to try to zoom in to see if we can actually capture this, but just to the, yeah, you can actually see it just to the right of the thumb hole, the Spidey hole. There's a few lines. You know, you have this big line here, but then to the left, there's a few smaller lines, and that's actually, you know, if you can see it in person, you'd understand better, but that's actually a partial fingerprint. So someone, just in using the knife, had oil on their finger and touched the knife in a certain way and then closed it, and it actually stained in the fingerprint. And so that's something that I've not really ever seen, you know, and so that can really just tell you how finicky this steel might be in terms of stain resistant. Now, as far as the edge goes, when I got this edge back, it was pretty dull. It had been used quite a bit. I know that it was sharpened up really, really well by Machete J. He used it a lot, but then he has some pretty good machinery and was able to sharpen this knife to the point where it was cutting phone book paper. So that was pretty impressive. But when I got this knife back from Doc P, who used it pretty aggressively, there were a number of just nicks and chips in the blade. Nothing huge, but they were there. And the knife was actually pretty darn dull. So he really used it, I know. And that's cool. I'm happy that he did. But what was surprising to me was just how quickly this edge repaired itself. The thing just wants to be sharp. So I'm going to zoom in again and try to take a look at the edge, and maybe you can see where some of those nicks were. So right here there was a little bit of a nick, and there still is, and then like here there's a small one, just a couple of little small ones that if you can really see the detail, the edge is certainly still not perfect. But what was surprising to me was just how quickly the edge came back on the Spyderco Sharp Maker. You know, I used the Sharp Maker on this knife for about an hour. And I went from having a knife that wouldn't cut paper to a knife that was shaving hair and was pretty darn sharp. You know, it's not anywhere near what the factory was. And I'm sure that if I was a better sharpener and had a better system, I could even do a lot better job than I did. But I mean, this is a very functional edge that is on this knife now, and it's one that I won't have to worry about for a long time just because of how long it will retain its edge. And so just how easy this was to maintain was a surprise for me, a very pleasant surprise, because my experience in sharpening hard steels just hasn't gone well in the past. ZDP 189 I could do nothing with. I couldn't reshape it. I couldn't hone it. I couldn't do anything. And I actually had the Spyderco Stretch 2 in that ZDP, and I had to sell the damn thing because I couldn't I couldn't get an edge on it. And so I actually sent it to my buddy Machete J, and he was able to do it in no time. And so for me to be able to do the Maxamet, I don't know, it just says a lot about just that quality of steel and how even though it is very hard, it was still relatively easy to reshape and get that edge back. Now, there's a lot of variables that go into that. I get that, and I'm going to cut in just a minute to the cut test video so you can see the edge still isn't perfect, but it's usable. And so someone who's not an expert, I think, could probably maintain Maxamet and use it pretty well. Now, like I said, it was a little bit chippy, and that kind of thing is going to happen. The reviews of Maxamet have been sort of up and down. A lot of people have said that it chips a little bit more than they would like. Some people have seen it chip a whole lot. The nicks that I saw were very minor in this, despite the fact that it was used very excessively. So it wasn't anything major, but it was certainly more than I would expect from, you know, maybe a softer steel that has a little bit more toughness. So yeah, there is all that. So if you want to see the details about that cutting ability at this point, I will cut to that right now, and then I'll come back and do the size comparison with the Lil Native. All right, guys, and here is a Maxamet Native 5 paper slicing test just after using the Spyderco Sharp Maker right here. I did it on a 30-degree back bevel edge first, and then moved over to 40 degrees. I don't know if that was the right way to go, but you know, for what I need this knife for EDC, you can see it's just fine. slicing just fine. Let me see if I can get here a shot of my furry knuckle. Let's see if so shaves that pretty easily. So yeah, definitely not a perfect edge, but a more than functional one. And the way that this maintains its edge, I'm pretty sure it'll hold up nicely, even just like this. So maybe in the future I'll get a professional sharpening job on it, but for now that's going to be more than just fine. And it's with a sharp maker from a person who isn't very good at sharpening. So sort of says a lot about how easy that steel is to work with. All right, guys, so here we are with the little native on the table now as well, in addition to the native 5 in Maxamet. And I've wanted to get these two next to each other in front of the camera for so long. As soon as I got the little native, I was just really curious to see how I would feel about the native 5 when I had them next to each other and in hand. And honestly, they're both really good knives for different reasons. And I think they'll probably appeal to different types of people, to be honest with you. When you look at them, I mean, the big difference obviously is the size, but it's not that drastic as you might think. You know, a little bit less than a half-inch difference in cutting edge, and then another like half-inch plus at the back of the knife. So just over an inch total in additional length for the native versus the little native. And what that does is I think it just increases ergonomics and just makes it, more capable for a number of different people. Whereas the little native is really not going to be for everybody, just because hand size is probably going to play a big factor in that. But one of the big dimensions that you have when you compare these two knives is just the thickness. You know, and again, this is definitely the lightweight version. So the G10 I think is a little bit beefier than this. But that said, I mean, the little one is just as robust, you know, just as thick. And so the way that I look at it is that the little native is really just in all things EDC for someone who wants a smaller knife. You know, I don't really see it necessarily as a backup. I see it as just a small knife person's like go-to knife. Whereas, you know, the FRN version of this native 5 is just a great all-around EDC. One other thing that's really interesting to note between the FRN version here and the little native is that the weights are pretty much identical. So 2.47 ounces on the little native and 2.50 on the native 5. So yeah, just really interesting there. Just the dynamic and the way that this knife feels and functions, even though it is a very similar design, is pretty darn different. You know, it gives you a completely different feel in the hand. So yeah, just wanted to bring those two on camera together next to each other. And if I do get my hands on like a G10 full-size native, I'll definitely do that comparison to the little native as well. So yeah, just pretty interesting to have those there next to each other. And excited to get the native 5 back into my EDC rotation. Really looking forward to using this one a whole lot more. So guys, any questions, comments, complaints, suggestions about any of it, let me know down below. What's your experience on Maxamet steel? Do you have any yet? Are you looking forward to it? Is it something that you just want to avoid because you're not sure about it? Let me know your thoughts, and I will talk with you soon. Thanks very much for watching, and take care. Have a good one.